Drake might have just compromised his safety by beefing with Kendrick Lamar, but just how vulnerable is he? With the Not Like Us music video in constant rotation, fans are still talking about the beef between Kendrick and Drake. But one thing a lot of people overlooked is the street politics behind the music. When Kendrick and Drake's diss tracks made plenty of serious allegations and personal attacks, they also dealt heavily with LA's well-documented gang culture. Los Angeles has long been recognized as one of the most dangerous cities for rappers, and it's possible that Drake may have made himself completely unwelcome after challenging one of the West Coast's favorite stars. But what about the time Drake was almost set up by gang members in LA? And also, what's the backstory behind LA's deadly reputation? How did Drake try and lean on his own West Coast connections to try and beat Kendrick at the height of their beef? We're gonna go even further to investigate the unprecedented show of gang unity at Kendrick's historic pop-out concert just a few weeks ago. With a guest list this stacked with different gang sets, what exactly is Drake up against? And maybe most importantly, did Kendrick really chase Drake out of LA?
You know, a couple of from my hood got off and, you know, had a couple disputes and fights.
Drake himself allegedly almost fell victim to LA's streets years ago until a West Coast rapper intervened. The Game has long been considered one of the torchbearers of the West Coast. He shot to fame in the 2000s as a protege of Dr. Dre and a member of 50 Cent's group G-Unit. The Game has also spoken openly about his gang ties. He's famously well known for being a Blood and for being a member of the Cedar Block Pyru set in Compton. The Game's success in music and notoriety in the streets also meant that he was seen as a mentor figure for many up-and-coming West Coast artists. Kendrick Lamar's first tour had him opening for The Game as a hype man, and other artists like Nipsey Hussle have paid tribute to The Game's influence on them over the years. But, as it turns out, The Game also stepped in to protect Drake in what could have been a really tragic incident. In multiple interviews, Compton rapper The Game claimed that in 2015, Drake's safety was jeopardized by unnamed gang members who were monitoring his movements and wanted Game to help set him up. Instead, Game refused and offered Drake his protection. In their collab 100, Game raps about the incident in detail.
Called me to set you up, want me to come and wet you up, cause you are out of town like Biggie.
Game needing to protect Drake from being set up just goes to show that Drake knows all too well how dangerous LA could be. But how did LA get the reputation for being so deadly for rappers in the first place?
That was the culture. That's what it was. It wasn't dudes just pulling out and just shooting your ass. The dudes would beat your back then.
In February of 1997, the Notorious B.I.G. traveled to LA on a high-profile publicity tour for his upcoming album, Life After Death. From the very start, there were concerns about his safety. Biggie had been embroiled in an infamous East Coast-West Coast war, a years-long feud that involved some of the biggest names in hip-hop. At that point in time, rappers from LA were considered unsafe in New York, and vice versa. Biggie's biggest rival, Tupac Shakur, who represented the West Coast, had been murdered just a few months prior. Big didn't know it at the time, but this trip to California would end up being his last. From the very start, Biggie's visit to the city was tense. He admitted to hiring additional security for the trip, and he was booed by the audience when he appeared on stage at the Soul Train Awards.
What's up, Cali?
On March 9th, Biggie was leaving an industrial after-party when he was shot 4 times and killed. The murder of Notorious B.I.G. gave LA a reputation for being unsafe, but that reputation only became more intense in recent years. In 2020, New York rapper Pop Smoke was renting an Airbnb in the Hollywood Hills when he was targeted by a home invasion. Pop was pistol whipped and shot over his Rolex watch, which was later sold for just $2,000. Great job. In 2022, Florida rapper Kodak Black was shot in the leg and injured outside of a party hosted by Justin Bieber on Super Bowl weekend. While the shooter was never identified or arrested, Kodak insisted that it was a random attack. And just months later, Philly rapper PNB Rock was robbed and killed in front of his girlfriend while eating at Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles. Police later arrested 3 people in connection with PNB's shooting. PNB Rock's murder sparked an outcry from Ice-T, who grew up in South LA.
I love LA, but LA's violent. LA is a very, very f***ed up place.
Ice-T had previously received a lot of attention for advising out-of-town rappers to play it safe while visiting LA, claiming that the city is home to over 50,000 active gang members. The thing is, LA isn't just treacherous for outsiders. Rappers who claim the City of Angels have lost their lives in the very same streets. In 2015, Compton rapper YG survived the shooting while working at a recording studio. In 2018, Nipsey Hussle was shot 10 times while standing outside his clothing store in LA's Crenshaw district and killed. And in 2020, 2022, South Central local Drakeo the Ruler was swarmed by reportedly 60 men wearing masks who stabbed him to death while at a LA music festival. The sheer amount of violence and crimes targeting rappers have definitely earned LA its reputation. Ice-T said it best, it's the Wild West for a reason.
LA is an illusion. I could stand out here on the corner and any minute, like cars will pull up.
But when Drake dropped his diss song, Family Matters, everyone was looking to see how the gang affiliates that Drake shouted out would respond. In Family Matters, Drake shouted out specific artists well known for their street affiliations in LA, claiming that they were active in the streets while Kendrick isn't. First, there's YG, who has long claimed the Treetop Pyru set in Compton and has a long history of collaborating with Drake. Their hit single, Who Do You Love, from YG's debut album went double platinum and peaked at number 54 on the Billboard Hot 100. Their follow-up collaboration, Why You Always Hatin', was nearly as successful. It peaked at number 62 and also went double platinum. But after Family Matters came out, YG dropped a song called Weird that many fans speculated was a direct response to Drake's name drop.
When it's smoke, don't ever mention my name. You gon' have me jeopardizing my fame, jeopardizing the gang, jeopardizing when you hang.
Next, Drame name-checked The Game, who, as I mentioned before, is a flag-carrying member of the Cedar Block Pyrus and is well known for speaking on gang politics. But he's also famous for having worked closely with both Drake and Kendrick. However, in response to Family Matters, he opted not to take sides. He posted a video where he saluted Kendrick, but also referred to Drake as his so-called brother. Finally, Drake shouted out none other than Chris Brown himself. Breezy grew up in Virginia, but he's famously forged close ties with the Fruittown Pyru set, which is another Compton gang active in LA. Not only has Chris Brown famously been seen throwing up Fruittown gang signs, but unnamed gang sources spoke to TMZ and confirmed they've given Chris the green light to act as an affiliate of the Fruittown set. Chris didn't directly respond to Drake's shout out, but multiple videos have gone viral of Chris dancing and turning up to Not Like Us while in the club, even rapping along to the lyrics as Kendrick savages Drake. Pretty much every LA artist except for Game that Drake tried to click up with ended up turning their backs on him to side with Kendrick. But did Kendrick's blockbuster pop-out concert in Inglewood provide even more clues about what Drake's up against?
Today, I saw Whack 100 post, Drake, you're good at LA, you ain't gotta worry about nothing. If I'm Drake, I don't know if Whack is being sincere.
The pop-out concert on Juneteenth featured a murderous row of some of LA's most prominent artists, as well as a ton of up-and-coming acts. Industry heavyweights like Roddy Ricch, Ty Dolla $ign, and Tyler the Creator all performed, while up-and-coming artists like Rembo also got their own chance to shine. In fact, the event was celebrated as one of the biggest showcases of West Coast talent in history. But at the same time, the pop-out was a gathering for some of Drake's most prominent ops, both on stage and off. Kendrick even brought out Dr. Dre himself to perform the I See Dead People intro of Not Like Us, which left zero doubt that the legendary NWA founder was riding with Kendrick through thick and thin. But what's even more significant was at the end of the show where Kendrick brought every artist who performed on stage for a group photo. Kendrick commented on how emotional the moment was for him, taking care to point out the significance of different gang sections sharing a stage peacefully. Kendrick noted that there was Crips, Bloods, and Pyru sets all there assembled on stage together in an unprecedented show of unity that Drake should probably take notice of.
Everybody on this stage got fallen soldiers, but we right here right now celebrating all of them. This is special.
The cross-section of artists who appeared at the pop-out represents a huge portion of LA's complicated gang politics. Schoolboy Q, Kendrick's longtime label mate when he was at TDE, has openly repped the Hoover Criminals, a set that was once so notorious for beefing with rivals that their affiliation with the Crips was dropped in the 90s. Meanwhile, J-Rock, another close, longtime associate of Kendrick, is known as a bounty hunter Watts Blood, a set active in LA's Nickerson Gardens projects. YG, who's a Treetop Pyru, made a high-profile appearance where he not only performed his own set, but even danced along to the Not Like Us while Kendrick performed it 5 times in a row, stomping all over Drake's shout out to him on Family Matters. Ty Dolla $ign is admitted to gangbanging as a Blood, along with Westside Boogie, who's also known to have Blood affiliations. While Roddy Ricch has declined to broadcast his specific set affiliations, he's admitted to joining the Crips when he was younger. And Rembo has already openly spoke about his own Crip affiliations. Kendrick Lamar himself has been adamant that he was never a gangbanger, but grew up in an area of Compton notorious for having a Westside Pyru affiliation and has appeared many times in public with Westside Pyru members. And that's only naming the artists on stage. Prominent artists in the crowd included well-known Drake collaborator turned op Rick Ross from Florida and The Weeknd, who reps Toronto. Snoop Dogg, who's well known as a Long Beach Crip, didn't appear at the pop-out, but posted a video of support after, celebrating Kendrick uniting different gang sets and declaring him the king.
K-Dot, you are the king of the West. That's the kind of kings do.
Plus, Kendrick's lyrics on songs like Not Like Us and Euphoria allude to consequences if Drake ever decides to cross the line again. On Not Like Us, Kendrick said, "You think the Bay gon' let you disrespect Pot, nigga? I think that Oakland show might be your last stop, sounding a lot like a green light for Oakland to get busy if Drake ever decides to come through the city again. And on Euphoria, Kendrick's bar, "Don't speak to the family, Crody, it gets deep in the family, Crody," was widely interpreted as Kendrick warning Drake not to drag his family into the beef. But it's also very likely that Kendrick was warning Drake of how deep his family ties go when it comes to his connections to different gang sets across the city. Kendrick warned Drake to keep it a friendly fade, which in LA lingo is anything but friendly. Catching a friendly fade is pretty much the same as getting packed up by your enemies. And that sounds like an implicit threat if there ever was one. The Pop-Out show was definitely a landmark moment for street unity, but also broadcasted just how much Kendrick is respected throughout rival sets in LA.
Biggie and Chris with Bloods and Chris and Hoovers, but just to see that, bro, it's progress.
So here's the real question. How has Drake reacted to all of LA turning on him? For the most part, he's been pretty silent about his new surprise ops. For example, he hasn't publicly mentioned his longtime collaborator YG and the assumed subliminal shots that YG took on him on Weird. But in the aftermath of the beef, he seems to be taking his safety in LA a lot more seriously. Just days after Not Like Us shook up the rap game, Drake listed his $88 million mansion in Beverly Hills for sale. While it's possible that this was a real estate move that was planned out way before things really popped off, the timing seems pretty unmistakable. From the looks of it, Drake seems to be dropping his ties to LA and maybe trying to stay way out of Kendrick's way. More recently, Drake has been spotted spending a lot more time at his newly purchased $15 million ranch in Texas. This of course comes in the aftermath of violence erupting at his house in Toronto, where multiple intruders were apprehended by police and his security guard was shot. While there aren't any confirmed ties between that shooting and this beef, it's pretty obvious that Drake is in a precarious situation. For Kendrick's part, he's even taken notice to Drake's change of location. While performing his diss track Euphoria at the Pop-Out, Kendrick subtly changed his lyrics to reflect he was monitoring his enemy's whereabouts. While in the original version, Kendrick claims that he and Drake are on a 3-hour time difference, and a shout out to Drake living in Toronto, his live performance had Kendrick remarking on how they were only 2 hours apart now that Drake is cooped up in Texas. Pretty slick. It really looks like Kendrick chased Drake out of LA, and that his ops are so persistent that he had to relocate entirely to Texas. At this point, Drake hasn't been back to LA since things got heated. But you know all eyes are gonna be on him when he finally makes his return. Will he still be able to move around the city, or has his disrespect of the West Coast changed things permanently? Only time will tell, so we'll stay tuned to report on what happens.